All right, so we're going to be kicking off things with a conversation on shaping classrooms of the future. I'm going to be handing things over to Sherman Toppin. Sherman is an attorney with Toppin Law. And he will be joined on stage by Nick Clegg. Nick is the president of global affairs at Meta. He joined Facebook in 2018 when it was still called Facebook. And before that, he served in UK Parliament, worked in the European Commission, and served for 5 years as a member of the European Parliament. And he became leader of the Liberal Democrat Party in 2007. He also served as deputy prime minister in the UK from 2010 to 2015. He's also the author of 2 best-selling books. He has an incredible resume. We're really thrilled to have a conversation with him today. So without further ado, please welcome Sherman and Nick.
Well, how's everybody doing? Amazing, amazing. So this is the summit is winding down, and like the old adage said, we're saving the best for last. So Nick, I'm glad to be here with you. You have no idea. This is going to be a little personal as to why I'm so excited. You may know some of this, maybe they haven't told you, but you know, of course, I'm a lawyer now for 30 years. I went to William & Mary Law School, and that's where I teach. William & Mary, I heard somebody clap. Go Tribe. William & Mary was formed chartered in 1779. It's 245 years old. Now, this school has been sharing basically legal education the same way for 245 years. But last fall, I taught its first class totally in VR. Totally in VR. And there was a reason why that was possible, and this is why I have to thank you on behalf of William & Mary, on behalf of the students. It was through an initiative under your watch to support designers, and there was basically headsets. The headsets that we use were donated to Victory XR and to Victory Academy, and they basically got down to us. So here's the first time a corporate initiative trickled down to the right people. There was no budget for it, and the students couldn't afford it, but we were able to make history at that law school under your watch. So I want to thank you.
And go on, tell me, and then what is it a lot better than why is VR good for teaching law? How do you teach law in VR?
Well, that's the thing. VR. Listen, let me get.
I mean, I can visualize, and I've been on some of these experiences myself, teaching biology, traveling through the human body, teaching plumbing or you know, other kind of vocational trades. But law? How do you do law you do mock trials?
I mean,
mock crime scenes?
Yes. I mean, well, the way we used it, first of all, we intended to do it so that it was like nothing else the law students had experienced. So of course, we had to do basic skills. We were doing trial advocacy. They were doing arbitration, negotiations. We had presentations in court, you know, opening statements, closing statements, all the things that they would have to do live, they did in VR. And it's amazing to see what, after about a couple days as an avatar, or a couple class sessions, I should say, as an avatar, their personality came straight through. The way they were preparing for those presentations was exactly, and it prepared them as though they were in real court, in front of a real judge, in front of a real jury. And that was just that. But the other thing we were able to do that was very exciting using VR was to do things we could never have done. For example, we had one of the classes we dealt with, it was discrimination and whatnot. And so all the students had to change their avatar into someone else. And we had exercises where they had to be the person who was discriminated and actually. So we have found all these very useful ways, things we couldn't have done. There was one case based in the desert. We did the class in the desert. You know, this fireside chat, we would have a fire right here, and we would do the whole thing that way. But so it was exciting to see. And our class, once it hit the register that they could register for it, it had a waiting list in one day. One day, and there's a waiting list for next time I do it. So I'm happy that this technology is available. Legal education has been very traditional. I mean, technology has not been known in law, but it will be.
And what did your fellow academics and lecturers and teachers, did they think you were kind of crazy trying it out? Yeah.
Well, I'm crazy, so that's.
And what do they think now?
Well, they looked at the class, and even my professor.
So I'm interviewing you now. You realize
this is all backwards.
Reversal.
This is all backwards. So they looked at the class, even the ones that taught intellectual property and the teachers that did AI education and blockchain and all that. They were looking to see what would happen? Would students like it? Would it get budgeted next year? They're just watching. And once all of the reviews came in from the students and it was really successful, now it's like, where are you guys? There's 70 professors or more there, and I'm still the only one that teaches with VR.
One more question. And academic performance, have you seen a difference in terms of?
Well, they all passed.
Of course. No, but they would have passed anyway. I mean,
No.
how do you detect?
How do I measure?
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple measurements. All of the measurements, all of the assessments, if you will, were done in VR. They were avatars. They, everything they did. So what I looked at is I gave the students a choice going into the final exam. You can do a traditional final exam where you're graded on your performance just as you would in the bar examination or your other classes, or you can choose to do a complete VR presentation as a lawyer in the metaverse. Every single one of them chose that path. And every single one of them were so impressive. You would know that you were watching avatars practicing this way these students were. And so I know that I know that it works for legal education. And I want to see more of that in our law school as well as others. But part of what makes me excited about this is really what I want to talk to you about. So here I am. 2 days ago, there's been an announcement from Meta to help educators like me.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to talk about that. Like what is this announcement and how can it help educators?
Yeah, sure. Just hands up those of you here who've tried any of these headsets at any point. Oh, great. So and hands up how many of them tried it here. Oh, great. Well, I'm so delighted. So, okay, so most of you know what I'm talking about. These immersive experiences, they're called, virtual augmented reality, I think, as you've just described very eloquently, most people who use it in educational settings, whether it's to teach soft skills, I think I read the other day that Stanford does a whole program in VR to help people get ready for interview situations when people graduate and look for work, whether it is vocational skills. I've just done a demo with a wonderful company that helps electricians, plumbers, facilities managers, whether it is teaching history, walking the streets of Rome with a class of teenagers. I think the evidence suggests, as you know better than I do, that it inspires, it engages, and it helps retention in a really quite dramatic way. But what we keep hearing at Meta from you, and we're very interested to know whether any of you have experienced this, is that the technology, whilst it's got great potential, and it seems to have great use cases for education, is still not as user-friendly as it should be. If you're a teacher looking for content, virtual reality content, to teach history, to teach biology, to teach whatever, languages, it's just sometimes really difficult to find the content in a properly organized and curated education VR app store. And secondly, that if you need to sign in and sign off each of these headsets individually for each student or learner or pupil, it just becomes really cumbersome. You spend you spend an hour just getting people on and off the devices. So you need to make that more simple. You need to make sure that the headsets, however many there are, 3, half a dozen more, are basically workable out of the box straight away. And thirdly, this is what we hear, and again, very keen to know whether folk here feel the same, that teachers and educators should have complete control and visibility over what content is being shared, what each individual pupil, student, and learner is experiencing. Total control, transparency, and visibility. And at the moment, the way that the technology is configured, the way it's architected, there's just too much friction. There's just too much hassle. It's difficult to find the content. You've got to sign people in and out individually. Sometimes educators are not entirely sure whether they've got complete transparency and visibility over what each person each learner is actually experiencing. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what we want to smooth out all those wrinkles. We want to try and erase as much as we can all of those friction points. We want to make it as easy and user-friendly as possible, principally for the educators, for the teachers, but also, of course, also for the learning experience itself. So that's what we are now going to do. That's what I announced we're going to do. There's still a lot of T's to cross and I's to dot and details to sort out, but we're going to have this sort of education product ready certainly by the end of the year. We're going to try and work as rapidly as we can to have it available to you as quickly as possible. And it's very analogous to what Meta did as a company to encourage to help people who want to use these headsets in the workplace. So if you're a legal firm and you've got offices all around the country that you can, I meet, and have done for a long time now, I meet my team that work for me, and they're dispersed all around the world in the metaverse every Monday morning. I put my headset on, I'm either in Silicon Valley or I'm in London, and my team, which is in all different hemispheres of the world, we sit around a virtual table. And even though we're bobbing there, like sort of slightly cartoon-looking avatars, I look suspiciously 20 years younger, a lot.
That's intentional.
A lot slimmer, with a bit more hair up here and so on and so forth. It's great. You can choose your own avatar, by the way. But the amazing thing, as you know, is, and for those of you who haven't experienced it, if you just do that, if you just arrange to meet your colleagues or meet your friends or whatever, it's extraordinary how you really do feel you're breathing the same air, even though your brain's telling you might be thousands of miles apart. And if your neighboring avatar moves that way, you kind of move that way as well, because that's all. That's the sensory perception that you think you are right adjacent to those people. And I think when we chatted earlier in the day, a real telltale sign for me at least is. I spend, like I guess many of you do, a lot of time on Zoom calls, and I find myself by the end of the day, I really feel the strain on my voice, because as if I'm trying to talk through that screen to the people I'm speaking to, who you sort of see in those kind of lined up passport photographs. There's just a strain on your voice. And then the moment I have meetings in virtual reality, my whole voice relaxes, because I feel I don't need to project myself. I'm right there. And that's the whole point of it. It's the whole point of this technology is that we move from sort of looking at screens and sort of looking at the internet to being in it, to being in an environment, a virtual environment together. And that's in a sense, in a nutshell, what it's all about. And it's why I think it has such powerful educational use cases, because, for instance, I mean, it might be here. I was chatting to someone earlier today, was saying that with languages, there's quite a lot of evidence that people who are sometimes quite shy and reticent about trying out a language in person, for some reason, when they do it in virtual reality, they just feel much more happy to kind of have a go and make mistakes and not feel embarrassed about it. So I just think there are so many use cases. We at Meta, though, from all the feedback we've heard from people like you, Sherman, and many, many others, is we just need to make the product simpler, easier to use, out of the box, full transparency and control of the content that is chosen and provided by teachers to learners and so on.
And I think you're exactly right about that, because I can attest to all that friction. It was a whole day just to do the out-of-the-box for these 25 students to take this out and to learn it, and to configure it, and to work with the CIO and everybody at the school, and talk to the dean and make sure it was all data secure and cyber secure. The whole thing was a day, and that was a day of instruction that could have been used differently. But with your product, with this new change, that will take that away from us. Now, the thing I want to talk to you about is the content. What I have found is, so now we have students with the headset. They have it on, they're learning in my class. What now? What else is on the platform? And we found that if there was, what is Meta doing to encourage more developers onto the platform to use and to design for it?
So look, we're a tech company. We're full of engineers. We're not full of teachers and educators and so on. You don't want Meta creating educational content. But what we do provide is the platform, is the means, is the infrastructure, if you like, by which content is chosen by, well, it's produced by developers, chosen by educators, and digested by learners. And I think one of the reasons why I believe simplifying the way that content is presented is so important is if it's much easier for folk such as all of you here in this room to find the right content for that particular age category, for that particular topic or that particular subject at that particular time, and to navigate the VR app store where the library, in effect, the virtual reality library, where that is all stored, that will then create, hopefully, a sort of flywheel, a virtuous circle where developers will be much more incentivized to produce the right kind of content because it's going to be so much more easy to use. So I think one of the many things I want us to think about over the next few months is how we can really get that flywheel spinning, because content is king here. There's no point having these headsets and you know, people like me waxing lyrical about the educational potential of virtual reality unless there is the content.
Yes, yes.
And that's why we need to work in partnership with content developers. It's why it's so important that educators give feedback about the kind of content they want and they can use. But first, we need to do our bit just to make the whole thing work and operate more simply than it currently does.
So there's this question between educators. Is this VR, is this platform replacement to teachers, or is this a tool for teachers? And teachers fall on either side of that. And it's something that happens in academia. You don't want to help yourself become jobless, but at the same time, you see the technology helping students. How should educators be thinking about, the device?
Look, I'm not an educator. My mum was a teacher, but I see it almost exactly the reverse. I hope it's a wonderful, immersive, participatory, enjoyable tool to allow teachers to do what they do best, which is teach. Here's my view. I wouldn't be surprised if in many years to come, we look back on the way in which we teach particularly kids and think, wow, did we do that? Did we line them up in these joyless sort of lines behind desks to sit there grimly staring at a piece of paper and told to turn the same page in some dreary textbook? Oh my God, did we really do that?
We're still doing that.
Yeah, but it's serious. I really can envisage these technologies just making education more versatile, and look, we're all sort of anthropologically, we are social beings. We learn from each other. We learn together. And I think that's the great thing about this technology. It's not about putting these headsets on and everyone being cocooned in their own little kind of silo. It's stuff that you do together. I'm sure your class, when they were in the courtroom, were doing exactly that. So I think it's participatory. I think it's engaging. It's very visual. I was hearing from an AI researcher the other day who said something which really resonated with me. I'm sure I'm going to get this wrong and ventriloquize badly, but on his behalf. But he said something along the lines of, he said, we exaggerate language in the way in which people understand and learn and remember things. And he came up with some striking statistic about how your average 4-year-old toddler has consumed way more information and data than even the biggest, fanciest large language model that exists today in this kind of revolution of generative AI that we're going through now. And he said the principal reason for that is because of what you see. You just constantly consume. We're all, at the moment, looking at each other, looking at this room, we're consuming so much information. And it really resonated with me. He sort of said we exaggerate the role of language and of course, of speech. And of course, what VR does is it actually mobilizes all of our senses to learn. And to that extent, I think it's just a really rich tool, which I hope will assist and support teachers, absolutely not displace them.
Well, you mentioned AI. Much of this summit was devoted to understanding the role of AI in technology and education and whatnot. How should educators, from your view, I got you right here, how should educators be thinking about AI? And I know it's integrated with some of your material, your devices.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to remember, AI isn't one thing. Mm-hmm. It's a whole layer. It's a sort of foundational technology. And my own view is that there's been a lot of pretty misplaced and wildly inaccurate hype over the last year or so. Here's the weird thing. We call it artificial intelligence, and yet we as human beings constantly anthropomorphize artificial intelligence. It's a machine. It is not a human being. It doesn't understand the world. You know, these generative AI tools, they can write the most brilliant wedding speech or legal essay. They don't know how to drive a car or clear up a messy table. They don't know the world. They don't know the meaning of the words that they are parroting out and sort of spewing out in response to our prompts. So I think it's really important to kind of slightly aim off from some of the slightly sort of more breathless rhetoric around AI, but they're very powerful tools. They can digest and process huge amounts of information. And I think used well, I don't see why AI, and particularly, I mean, AI, by the way, has been around for ages. It's been sort of around since the 1950s, and companies like Meta have been using AI for a very, very long time. It's just generative AI is the kind of new thing. I don't see why generative AI and these new models can't be used to, firstly, simplify a lot of dreary work for teachers. I think there's a lot of things, and for educators, I think there's a lot of way this technology can be used as a real support to allow teachers to focus on teaching, and particularly when it comes to processing lots of data and lots of information and marshalling a lot of information and producing reports. I think it'll be a huge, huge assistance in all of that. And the second thing is, I think a lot of these AI tools can be used, already are being used, to personalize education. And my rudimentary understanding of the kind of a lot of the sort of history of education is that, you know, particularly in North America and Europe and other places, we've been pretty good over the last 100 years, not perfect, but pretty good at, I think he wants us to go. I better.
Oh, you see.
All right.
There you go talking.
Can I finish this?
There you go talking. Well, what's your summary thought?
My summary thought is, I think AI could be good for education.
Well, I think you're right about that. Well, look, it's been a pleasure talking to you in this fireside chat when the fire's not here, but it's been a pleasure talking to you, Nick, and I look forward to seeing you again and learning more. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Shane.